Welcome back, guys, to another episode in my Bitcoin playlist. Today we're going to be looking at the question, what is good money, or what makes good money? We're going to examine I call chemical, but the chemical properties of money, although these properties are not necessarily chemical. These properties, as it relates to money, in the case of gold, are actually chemically related. Like they come about based off of the atoms that make up gold. But in the case of other forms of money, they're not necessarily chemical, but they are the properties by which monies are competing. And we're going to examine these as it relates to three different kinds of money: gold, fiat money, and Bitcoin. When we talk about, or when we refer to fiat money, what we mean is money that fiat means by decree. So basically, fiat money is anything that is decreed by an institution to be money. So the dollar, for example, it has not emerged organically as a form of money. Basically, government says that this has to be used as money. So legal tender laws, or those sort of things make for fiat money. And let's just get into this chart that I have behind me in the computer, not me in real life. As you can see, this chart, and maybe I already said this, but this chart was created by Vijay Boyapati in his article, The Bullish Case for Bitcoin. And we're going to be examining these different properties: durability, portability, fungibility, etc., and go through them one by one, kind of talk about why they got the grades that they have. And I'm going to try and keep this short. I don't want to make these videos long. I'm trying to keep them under 15 minutes, so hopefully I don't miss anything, but we are going to move through this pretty quickly. So start with durability, right? Gold gets an A+ rating here, and it's not hard to understand why. Gold has been around the longest, and for basically all the gold that's ever been mined, extracted from the earth, and exists above the earth, is still above the earth, right? It doesn't like degrade over time. Fiat money gets a grade of a C, and when we talk about fiat money, it's not as interesting to talk about, you know, the paper or the coins that represent fiat money. It's more interesting when thinking about the durability of fiat money to look at the institutions that issue the money. Vijay Boyapati, in his article, he refers to the Weimar Republic and talks about the Rentenmark, and the I forgot the third one, but basically all the different forms of currency that existed in Germany throughout its history, and how they have, you know, basically tended towards zero over time. And so fiat money is only as powerful as the institution that issues it, and if history is any indication, it's not necessarily the most durable form of money, right? And so Bitcoin gets a little bit better of a grade because although Bitcoin is not natural in the same way that gold is to the earth, Bitcoin exists naturally on the internet, and it is a creation of the internet, and it has been it comes from the internet and exists natively on the internet. And throughout the last 10 years that Bitcoin has persisted on the internet, has continued to produce a block every 10 minutes. There's never been a fraudulent transaction on the Bitcoin blockchain, and it has undergone numerous attacks, and it has never broken. And so although Bitcoin's only 10 years old, I suspect that in another 10 years, if Bitcoin continues to perform, we might think about upgrading this letter grade to an A. So portability. Bitcoin wins out here. Gold is extremely unportable, right? Like, it's very hard to walk through an airport with gold, or to carry bricks of gold. It's very heavy, it's very dense. Fiat money is a little bit better than gold. It's actually kind of, if you look at the history of how dollarization and certification happened, fiat currencies used to actually be redeemable for gold, right? Like, governments just weren't able to always just issue paper dollars, and people were just like, oh yeah, this is money, like we accept this. No, what happened is that they used to have those papers redeemable for gold, and they sort of got rid of that in the 70s, and so here we are today. And yes, although paper currencies are a little bit more portable, it's not as portable as Bitcoin. Bitcoin is actually like the most portable store of value that ever, really. You can carry millions or billions of dollars in Bitcoin in your brain through a seed phrase, which is a phrase of 12 to 24 words, or maybe 13 or 25 words, depending on how you do it. But yes, you can carry a large amounts of value in Bitcoin, and you can also send this over the internet for at basically no cost and very easily, right? And so Bitcoin gets an A plus here, and it's far above and beyond the other two forms of money. So fungibility. Gold wins out here. Gold is the most fungible, particularly if you melt it down. An ounce of gold, you know, an ounce of gold in the United States is an ounce of gold in China, is an ounce of gold in Russia, is an ounce of gold in India, right? Like you can always melt it down, and it's very fungible. Dollars are a little less fungible, depending on the institution that's issuing them. They often have they often have like tracking numbers on them. So like you can, although like if I'm doing a direct exchange, like to the merchant, this dollar is just as good as the other dollar, but technically you kind of can trace these dollars depending on how they're being issued. Bitcoin it gets a grade of a B here. I actually would disagree. I actually give Bitcoin a grade of a C right now in terms of its fungibility. That's because Bitcoin is extremely traceable. Bitcoin exists as a ledger, and this ledger is accessible to anyone, and when transfers occur on this ledger, everyone has to agree upon that, which means everyone knows sort of where the Bitcoin's been and how it has transferred over time. So Bitcoin gets a grade of a B, although I would probably actually give it a grade of a C. Verifiability. Bitcoin wins out here. It's the most verifiable. Bitcoin is mathematically verifiable and cryptographically secured. Compared to gold and fiat, with fiat people can create fake money. This happens pretty often, but I mean, it's usually people can tell, and there's a lot of machinery and stamps that people use to check out for this sort of thing. But even gold has been throughout history. Kings have diluted their currencies by sort of not actually giving the correct percentage of gold in the coins, right? So basically they like mix in other elements. There's been gold-plated tungsten has been used to kind of trick people into people thinking that this is gold, right? So it actually is not that easy to verify gold versus Bitcoin. Like if someone sends me a Bitcoin transaction, I'm going to know relatively quickly if their subjective definition of Bitcoin matches mine, and if it shows up in my wallet, and after about 10-20 minutes, if it has been secured in the blockchain, we're good to go. And I'm going to make myself a little bit smaller here. Divisibility. This one again, Bitcoin kind of beats out all the other options. Bitcoin is actually divisible to the 100 millionth of a Satoshi, and this divisibility also allows you to transfer very, very small units of value, right? Like people are using the Lightning Network today, which Lightning Network is a second layer solution on top of Bitcoin, and they're sending fractions of a penny in value over the internet at essentially no cost, right? So it's extraordinarily divisible, and it's more divisible than gold. Gold gets sort of the worst grade in this one, in this category. It's very hard to divide gold up. You kind of either have to have it in coins or, oftentimes just because of the chemical properties of gold, you really have to have it in a little bit larger form. Even gold coins are usually pretty big, right? So it's not that divisible. Fiat money is a little bit more divisible. kind of, again, depends on the institution that's issuing the currency, but here in the United States, you have pennies, you have dimes, all of these, all this change and coinage helps divide up a dollar, so it gets a grade of a B. Now let's move on to scarcity. This one I think is probably the most interesting property of money, and Bitcoin although is closely competed with gold, it again takes the cake here. Bitcoin is in fact the most scarce entity. Other than human time, there's nothing that is more scarce. And I actually believe that it is Bitcoin's scarcity that makes it a better form of money alongside its unconfiscatability. And there will only be 21 million Bitcoin in existence. So if I have, let's say 10 Bitcoin, I know that only 2.1 million people in the world could possibly have as much Bitcoin as me. And I believe that it is this characteristic of Bitcoin that makes it the best form of money because, as George Gilder talks about in his book, Life After Google, money ought to be a measuring stick, right? And it ought to help you measure time, and it ought to help you measure the value that you've created and also the knowledge that one has obtained. And because the dollar, you see that the fiat gets a grade of an F here. And really, if you think about this, I often tell people, if we think about the dollar in terms of its ability to hold value over time, we just have to look at a simple mathematical equation and ask ourselves, what is the value of 1 over infinity, right? And the answer is 0. Because fiat money is printable without bound, it's very hard to talk about the scarcity or really to understand the value of something that can continually be printed and basically kind of has no one really controlling it other than 12 unelected Federal Reserve boardmen and governors. Yeah, I think they're called governors. Gold here gets the grade of an A. Obviously, gold is extremely scarce. There are some people who theorize about the possibility of mining gold on astrological bodies such as comets and possibly even deep sea mining. And so we're not entirely sure at how much gold there really is on the Earth. Seyfedin Ammous, he theorizes that basically that gold is unbound in its amount, and it's really just a question of how much resources and time are we willing to put into getting and finding this gold. And so looking at the established history, this is really where Bitcoin is the weakest. Again, Bitcoin's only been around for 10 years, but it's my belief that in another 10 years, Bitcoin will be seen by many as basically just being like a fact of life, the same way that many people don't question whether the internet is going to be around tomorrow. So although Bitcoin does not have a very established history right now, and this is definitely Bitcoin's weakest property, I think that will change with time, and that's kind of part of the economic speculation that one engages in whenever they decide to hold Bitcoin. And it's part of that risk analysis that everyone has to do for themselves. Gold clearly gets an A+ here. It has a very long and hardened history. And fiat currencies get the grade of a C. I don't really know how he came up with that. I guess I would probably give it the grade of a D as well, personally, just because there's been so many different institutions that have issued different fiat currencies. It's really hard to... fiat currencies as a whole, I guess, have been around for a very long time, but talking about any one specific currency, even the US dollar has really only sort of held its place in the world for maybe 50 years as like the reserve currency of the world. And obviously that's being challenged today by other countries, and time will tell how long that continues for. But the last property, and I think this is, again, one of the most interesting properties of money and one where Bitcoin completely outperforms the others, which is censorship resistant. So Bitcoin sort of gained notoriety in its early days for its use in illicit dark market drug transactions. And the reason that Bitcoin was used in this way is because of its censorship resistance, right? Bitcoin is permissionless. Anyone can use Bitcoin. I don't need permission from a bank. I don't need permission from a government. As long as I have a computer and internet connection, and really you don't even need that thanks to BlockFi and some companies that have satellites in space that send down the Bitcoin blockchain, and people can actually do Bitcoin transactions via SMS, right? Like Bitcoin, it just dramatically outperforms all other forms of money in terms of its censorship resistant. No one's able to take it away from you. No one's able to tell you you can't use it. This is in great contrast to fiat money, which at any time that the U.S. government wants to freeze your assets, or if your bank doesn't like where you're sending your money, you want to donate to an organization such as WikiLeaks, right? This was actually one of the first use cases for Bitcoin, because payment providers wanted to shut down donations to WikiLeaks. And so fiat money gets a really bad grade here. Gold gets a slightly better grade. However, the history of gold and the fact that it is physical and not digital makes it likely to be centralized, and once it is centralized, it's easy to censor. It's very hard to imagine walking through an airport and sort of bringing a large sum of gold with you and people not noticing, or like at some point someone not noticing, right? Like it's very easy because of its physicality to censor it. So gold gets the grade of a C, and I think that one category I would have liked to add to this chart that I don't see on there is central or decentralization. Fiat is in my imagination, we get a grade of an F in terms of its decentralization. And decentralization is a really big buzzword, but we don't like decentralization for decentralization's aspect. We like decentralization because of what it allows in terms of again, censorship resistance, permissionlessness. These sort of things, right? Gold would get a little bit better of a grade, I would think. Although a lot of gold resides inside the central banks right now, these central banks are very much distributed. But Bitcoin is a very flat architecture, meaning that all the nodes on the network are equal in sort of their power and their ability to verify transactions on the network if you're running a full node. So there's no one who has any more power than anyone else. And so Bitcoin would get the grade of an A here. And again, decentralization isn't just like something that we want just because, oh, that's cool. When you're talking about money, you really do want something that, again, money is 1/2 of every transaction. So it's important that no one be able to keep you from doing what you want with your money. And there are those who would disagree with this, and I believe that this will be a point of great contention going into the future, whether, and I think that governments will use this pain point to try to scare away people from Bitcoin, or really just to continue to preserve their dominance as the issuers of money. Because as F.A. Hayek pointed out, I actually don't know where he said this, but I believe it was him who said, "I care not who makes the laws of a nation. Give me control of the printing press, and like I'm good," right? Because of the importance and significance that money plays in humans' lives, whoever controls the printing press, whoever has control over what is considered money, really is able to exert a lot of power And if they do this in a good way, that's great. But history suggests that absolute power corrupts absolutely. So I don't really, that's how we're going to end it today, kind of ending it on a dark note. But I hope that this video was eye-opening, and I hope that this was interesting to start thinking about, again, these properties of money and what makes good money. And we'll continue on with this playlist. I'm not sure what the next video is going to be, but I'm sure you're not going to want to miss out. If you've made it this far, it would mean the world to me if you liked this video. I love hearing from you guys, so please comment in the comment section below and share this video with a friend, someone who needs to see it, someone who you've been talking about Bitcoin with. That really helps out. And follow me on Twitter at @elima_III. Talk about all things Bitcoin and life and entrepreneurship. So see you guys there, and thank you for watching. Law.